Hello and welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Soebbing. It is a Stashin with Stephanie Day. That's where we come out with a brand new fat quarter friendly pattern that's been inspired by this month's collection. We're working with Glyphs from FreeSpirit Fabrics this month. And so we're going to get to the tutorial today. It's a fast one because we're doing a lot of strip piecing, but it looks absolutely fabulous and is a great way to show off all of these eclectic fun prints. But before we get to that, we're going to take a peek at the fabric and I'm going to tell you a little bit about Stashin with Stephanie. It is a subscription club that we started about 4 years ago, and we currently have about 800 members who each month get a bundle of 10 fat quarters. Now, if you're counting on here, you'll see there's actually 15 here. So you get your bundle of 10 and you get the pattern that has been designed and inspired by the fabric. And most months that pattern is in multiple sizes. So if you just want to use your bundle of 10 that you got, you're probably going to be able to do that by making one of the smaller sizes like the crib. But if you want to make the size that I've made, which usually is going to be a lap or a twin, we have what's called a finishing kit. You've got your 10 already, and then we send you the 5 you did not receive plus your background and binding. So that's enough to do your quilt top and have coordinating binding for your quilt. And that is an exclusive for our members, and they also get an exclusive discount on that. So that way they can save a little bit extra. So they save a little bit on their fabric purchase for their bundle to start with. They save a little bit on any extra fabric they buy, both for the finishing kit and any additional yardage that they might like. And then they get access to all of our previous Stashin with Stephanie patterns, which is over a $200 value right now. They get exclusive discounts on my 2 fat quarter books, Fat Quarter Workshop and Fat Quarter Patchwork Quilts, and they also get first dibs on getting additional fabric. Now, we have had a lot of chatter in our Facebook group for the club this month. People are very excited about this. It is entirely possible that by the time we release this video to everybody else on our email list that is not a member, that this might be gone. They may have picked through some of the best fabrics, are probably going to be completely gone on yardage. We may or may not have kits available. We may or may not have bundles available. It is very, very popular, and we are not always able to get more when we have a collection that hits like this one appears to be doing, with the excitement that is buzzing around it on our Facebook group. So you're going to want to make sure that you're a member of this club, because especially coming into the summer months, we don't order that much extra because we know a lot of you guys are traveling and you're outside in your gardens. And so we know that right now quilting isn't always top of mind. So we order a little bit more conservatively going into the summer months, and we don't always have that much extra fabric. So it's a good thing to have first dibs, so that way you can make sure if it's something you really like, you can get all of it. So it's a good club to be a member of. Now this part here is where I get emails about every single month, because people either skip this part of the video or they did not read any of the many emails that we send them after they sign up. But if you sign up by the end of the month, so we're in April, so by the 30th, then you will receive your first bundle. It will ship around the 20th of next month, so in May. If you sign up on May 1st, then you are waiting until June 20th to get that shipping notification. The reason is we prepare all the bundles to ship out at the same time, so that everybody has the same chance to get that extra fabric. Because otherwise, if we were shipping as the payments came in, then that pattern would be out, this would be totally picked over, and you wouldn't be getting your bundle yet. It would, if you were shipping on the 30th and we had released the pattern on the 25th, it's a good chance the fabric might be gone by the time you get it in the mail. So this is just the best way to do it, so that everybody has a fair chance at getting what they need. Also, so that we prepare the exact amount of bundles that are needed, so that there's the most left over for additional fabric for you guys and our members. It works really well. There's just that little bit of delay for that first month, and then from there on out you get them every month like clockwork. So that's the biggest thing you know. If you sign up at the end of the month, you're going to get a shipping notification around the 20th of June, of May. If you sign up in May 1st, you're going to have to wait until June to get that first bundle. I know it's a long wait. It's why we only promote the club at the end of the month. But if that's you, you've got to pay attention to this section, and then your expectation will be set and you'll be excitedly waiting for your bundle instead of getting your undies in a bunch because you didn't read and you didn't pay attention. So just a little bit to know, and you will be super happy we have lots and lots of very happy members. All right, let's get into our tutorial. This pattern is called Subway. I designed it after I was laying subway tile in my bathroom shower, so you can see that life definitely influences my art, but also it just is a great way to show off all these fabrics by putting a little bit of white sashing in between. It just lets everyone shine on its own, and it is so fun. So let's take a peek at the fabrics and then we will do the tutorial. So the pattern is called Glyphs, and there's all different types of writings and markings on it. Some of it is really obvious, like obviously we can see a lot of typeface that's all intermixed and mingled in here. But this one is a really fun one, especially when we put it in the quilt, because depending on where you're cut, it's going to look totally different depending on what section of this you are getting when we're cutting it apart. Now this to me looks more like a sketch or a print or something. It doesn't look to me like writing, but it is still really cool and clearly hand drawn. Now this one is really fun. It has these dark ink swirls on top of what appears to be ledger paper. You can see like the little lines where you might like write out your ledger for like your checkbook or keeping accounts or something. But then beneath it, you just see the colored lines that you would see. It's really very pretty. This is the boldest print in the line, this yellow. It's got a lot of textured yellow, mustard yellow, and some beige in the background. And then you just see these swoops of O's. It looks like it was done with a big fat marker. It looks really neat. This is one of the ones to me that doesn't look like it's a discernible writing, but it does look cool. It definitely looks hand drawn. And the little bit of like a peachy tan background really looks nice with the next couple of prints that we're looking at. This one just looks like a really fun doodle swirl where it's going round and round and round in a really tight way. That doodle is kind of white, and then we have sort of a mottled tan in the background. This one is really fun because of all of the layered texturing that is going on. We have multiple different colors of little pixelated dots all throughout here. And then we have sections where we have you can still see the pixelated dots in these outlines of the hexagons in here, and then you have it reversed in some areas, but then the white is all in different shapes of triangles. It's really cool. There's a lot going on in this print. It looks great when we cut it up and put it in the quilt. We have those big fat hand-drawn O's again, and again lots of really great graffiti-like texture in the background with a really medium powderish blue and some tan. This piece is kind of transitional. We have those marked out O's again, and they are kind of in the same powder blue as we see here. We also still see that tan going through it, but now we're transitioning more into some charcoal backgrounds, and it looks really awesome. Now this to me looks like a negative of a print. It looks like someone took like a really big fat Sharpie and just scribbled all over everything. But instead of the scribble being black, they kind of put it in reverse so that the scribble is white, and then you have that dark background. This one's really fun. This one is really fun too. To me, it looks like scales or shark teeth, but I think what they were going for was like the ancient form of writings where you like push something into clay in order to create something. And again, it has that same effect as the last one where it looks like it's in reverse, like you're looking at the negative of it. We have another big scribble, this time with the white background, and there is dimension to the scribble. It's not just a straight black. There are sections where it looks like the pen has had different pressures on it, where we do have a lighter charcoal and not a true black. So it really is a fun print. It has a lot happening in it. This one just looks like ink splotches on white background. To me, it almost reminds me of like a Rorschach test, but obviously that's not quite what it is because it's a bunch of things instead of one main one in the center. This is another one where it is obviously writing, like there's different letters in here, and also discernible words, like we can see what here and stories, tell. There's lots of other words in here too that you could have some fun with, and it sort of repeats on this structure here where we kind of have some squares, and it's kind of like a black blue, like it totally works with the blues that we have, but it also works next to black, and because of that brown it really coordinates with a lot of what's happening in this collection. And this one here is just a big collection of just little ink splotches where it looks like they just kind of were tapping the pen all over. This is a really fun one too when it is cut up into the quilt. All right, so this is Glyphs from FreeSpirit. Our members who were members last month have received 10 of these fat quarters in the mail, and if they like, they got first dibs on getting in the rest of it to complete their collection, plus background and binding if they want to make the quilt, plus first dibs on additional yardage. I'm not sure how much is going to be left. If you are joining right now because you saw this and you love this fabric, you're not going to get this fabric in the mail. It's already been shipped out. So you're going to want to order a full twin size kit that is not meant for Stashin with Stephanie members if you want to make this quilt and you need this fabric in your life, because the next collection we get is going to be from Wyndham. Totally different fabric, but it's always something fun every single month. All right, let's get into that tutorial. This month's pattern, Subway, is very beginner friendly. What we're going to do is you're going to follow your cutting instructions to cut 2 long strips out of your fat quarters, and then we're also going to cut a bunch of background strips from our background fabric. Now, for some of them, we're going to be leaving these completely full, but for the strip piecing component, you're going to want to take it and you're going to want to cut it apart at the fold line so that your strip is the same length or width, depending on which way you're looking at it, as your fat quarter strip, like that. Now these might be slightly different widths, like might see mine's a little bit longer. That's no big deal. But what you want to do is line it up so that your selvage edges are even, because if you want to be trimming some off, you want to be trimming it off from the part that you can't use. Whereas if I line it up here, you know, you might end up with problems later. So what we're going to do is super simple. This is a very basic beginner level technique. Is we're going to just lay these right sides together and we're going to stitch down this. Now it does kind of matter what side you're putting your strip onto, so just make sure that you're following the instructions that are outlined in the pattern, which you can get on our website shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. Just a reminder that it's free if you're a member of the club. All right, so I'm going to take this and I'm just going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam going down the edge. I've got that strip on the bottom just because it makes the most sense to me, but you could certainly sew with it up as well. But all I do here is I'm going to arrange those sides together so that my edges of the fabric are nice and even, and then I just put my finger down to kind of hold that together. And I let it go up as the feed dogs take the fabric. And then when it can't go up any further, I just repeat and do the same thing again. Now remember, when you get down to the bottom, these might not be the same length. That's fine, you didn't mess anything up. But when I can no longer hold over here, what I do is I put my finger to the side, and that way I'm able to guide and maintain that 1/4 inch stitch all the way down the entire seam. Now I press my seams open as often as possible. It makes for really flat joins, and especially when you're strip piecing like this, you end up with a lot straighter seam because you're not like pressing and then things up getting a little bit warped. But I just put my fingers a little bit ahead of the iron to finger press that seam open, and then I keep the center of that iron going straight down as I go across. Now when I'm done, I flip everything over and press again from this side. Sometimes I'll also hit it with a spray mister just to make sure we are good and flat. Now we're going to have a whole bunch of these to do for this quilt, so I suggest that you chain piece both the stitching and the pressing to make it go faster. Now this is why strip piecing is amazing, because instead of cutting a tiny little rectangle and a bigger rectangle and sewing those all together and pressing them all individually, we're able to do all that first, and now we're going to cut to create that unit. Go super fast. So what I like to do is line it up with the side that my fold is on. That's because if I've cut something wrong or my fat quarter isn't as long as it should be, I can use a teeny bit of the selvage in there. That's not going to be the end of the world, but I can't really go the other way. Like if I were to cut off the selvage first and then I just didn't have enough on this side, I can't like make more fabric. So I'm going to start over here. And what I want to do is line any inch line up with that seam allowance. That's going to make sure that that's nice and 90-degree angle when we cut this up later. And I'm going to come over to the edge as far as I can while still being able to get my minimum measurement in there. Once I'm happy with where everything is at, I'm going to go ahead and give that a cut. Now for this first one only, I'm going to flip everything over and square up that edge. Now I can just keep going down and cutting those apart, and it goes just so fast. All right, so I've got a whole stack of these ready to go, and that was super fast, super easy, way better than cutting a bunch of tiny little rectangles from our background and a bunch of larger rectangles from our back quarters and then doing that individually. We're all about making things efficient here at Quilt Addicts Anonymous, because if we're sending you a bundle a month, we want to give you a pattern that you can reasonably actually make that quilt in a month. And honestly, most of mine go from start to finish in about 4 or 5 days. So, you know, it's got to be fast for me too. So we want you guys to feel accomplished and like you've done something cool, but not have it take up like every spare moment that you have. And speaking of keeping things easy, what I decided to do, because it's offset like subway tiles, so that we kind of are starting at different points of the tile or the rectangle block, is rather than creating separate sized rectangles for our even rows where we're going to start with half blocks on the side, what we're going to do is we're just going to cut off from units that we've already been created. That way you don't have to think real hard when you're at your cutting stage. You just have to select the correct amount of pieces for the beginning and end of your row for your even rows, and you'll be good to go. And the pattern has all that information in there for you. You just want to make sure that you are picking evenly from throughout your collection. So for example, I made the twin sized. We had 15 fabrics in the collection. I needed 16 half rows. So I selected one fabric from each fabric to go on, this is the beginning of my row, one from each to go on the end of my row, and then one extra got used twice on either side. So it worked really well. I was able to mix and match it, and I was able to cut it in bulk ahead of time, which also saves you time when you're laying everything out. All right, so now I'm gonna go ahead and show you how to trim these up. All right, so the unit I'm showing you how to cut now is going to be on the left side of our even rows. So what I'm doing here is I'm lining up 4 3/4 inches with that seam allowance. And I'm also lining up an inch line with the top so that I know that everything is nice and square. Once I'm happy with that, I'm gonna go ahead and give it a cut. This little piece you can save for your scraps or discard. This piece you can just put in your left side of your even row pile and then just repeat for as many of them as you need in your quilt. Now we're going to prepare the unit for the right side of our even rows. This time we don't need this square, so we're going to be cutting that off. So now I've got 5 inches lined up here and an inch line lined up there, and that's going to give me what I need. Give that a trim. And this section we're going to discard, this section we're going to keep, and it's going to be on the right side of that even row. Now we have one final unit to prepare. This unit is going to be on the left side of our odd rows. So you're going to need as many of them as you have odd rows in your quilt, and again the pattern tells you everything you need. Now for this one we do need one tiny background square. You don't need a lot of them, but you are going to need to cut just a little bit of them. And again, you're going to want to make sure that you are using this evenly throughout your fabrics. For mine, I needed 16, so I used every single one time because I had 15 fabrics in the quilt, and then I doubled up on one and it worked out perfect. So all you're going to do is you're just going to put it right sides together, stitch down, press open, and you're good to go. All right, so now you're going to take your extra units plus the ones that we already prepared from the strip piecing, and we're going to start laying out our quilt. Now, this is a really helpful time to have an extra bed where you can just kind of lay it and leave it until you get it all sewn together. Or if you're lucky enough to have a design wall, that's really helpful as well. One thing that I found as I was putting mine together is the odd and even rows together use 15 different fabrics for this strip piece. So what I did, rather than having to lay the entire quilt out at first, is I did 2 rows at a time. I could just pull 15 fabrics between our regular strip piece units plus any of the 3 specialty ones that we need for the beginning and ends of our row. And I was able to just lay that out, make sure I only had one of each per 2 rows, and it worked out perfect. Now, if you're doing the crib or if you are doing the king, that's not going to work as easily because it doesn't divide as perfectly as that. But it's an option. You want to make sure that you're using things evenly. That way you don't get down to the bottom and all of a sudden you realize you have like 5 of these left and only 5 spots left to fill. You don't want to do that. So what I did, I've already got my rows all prearranged here. I'm going to lay out my bottom 2 rows so that you can see what I'm working with. All right, so you can see that I have no repeats between the first and the second row. I know you can't see the whole row, but you can see enough of it. So what I did is I just laid out 2 rows at a time, made sure everything looked good, nothing was clashing, and we all had nice, good places to be. All right, so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to start positioning these to sew them together. I only sewed 1 row together at a time because I felt like I was less likely to mess stuff up in order of the placement, because I want to make sure when I'm laying these out that there's good eye movement. So you can see here that I've got a dark surrounded by some lights, and I've got the medium over here because I don't want that to sort of take away, but I also don't want a bunch of lights in a row. So I really kind of thought about where I was placing things as we went together and made everything fit correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and start arranging these to sew together just for my top row right now. Now when I do this, what I do is I arrange them right sides together with the 2 that are going to be sewn together. Now this one here is an odd one, so that's not going to be sewn together just yet. But what I do is I stack them together with the side that I'm going to be stitching on the right, because that way I can bring it right over here. And then when I get my sewing machine out, I'm able to just lift this up and bring it right to the sewing machine. And that works for me to remember that this is the side I'm supposed to stitch on. Another way you could keep track of that is to just put like a little clip on it to remember this is the side I'm sewing, this is not the side I'm sewing. But you kind of, as you do more sewing, you come up with tips and tricks to kind of remember and remind yourself this is what I'm doing next, so you do not confuse yourself. So this is what works for me. All right, so now that I've taken the time to stack these, what I can do is I can grab my first 2, and this is the point where I line stuff up. This is a really short seam, so this is not one that I would pin, but you certainly could if it made you feel more comfortable. And I can just chain piece this entire row. So I'm going to stitch those 2, then repeat that process with the next 2 that I have. Now remember, this bottom one is an oddball, so that one's just going to stay there. It'll get sewn on in the next section. So now what I do is I take this off and I clip my threads for chain piecing. I lay them out in the order they came in. So this was the last one sewn, so I'm going to put it right on top of that bottom one. Then this one was next, so it goes on top. And then this was the one that started out on top. Now, because I've done that, because I have taken time, what I can do now, and this is where I may lose some of you if you've never tried this before, is I flip this open, and then when I flip this section open as well, I can see that I'm matching up my background square to my fat quarter, or my background rectangle to my fat quarter rectangle. So I know that I've got this in the right spot. I can lay them right sides together and sew them. And that way you don't have to keep bringing everything back to your design wall or your bed or whatever you're working with, your floor. You're able to just kind of get it together a little bit faster. Now we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to open up and pull that to the side, and I can see that I'm ready to sew the fat quarter rectangle to the background rectangle. And this was the one that we left unsewn because we had an odd number in that row. Now you may notice that I have a pin in this one. This is the one that is my left side rectangle. And I did that on purpose so that I would remember at this step that that's the side of my row. Because right now I've got background rectangles on both sides, and it's really easy to confuse yourself on what side belongs to our piece that does not have a background rectangle yet. All right, my row is together, but I'm going to sew my second row together too before I press, so we can just do it all at once. This process is very similar, except because we started with those half blocks, we have an even number of the rows. Now, this is true for the lap and the twin size. You may end up with a different situation for any of the other sizes, but this works for me, and I've got everything stacked. And in this one, I don't, or I didn't press where this piece was because it was easier for me to remember. But you can always put a little pin there if you need that reminder of what is supposed to be your left side. All right, so this process is the exact same. I'm just gonna grab these and chain piece them, knowing that I've got them stacked up in the right order. All right, so this process is the same as it was before. I am just taking my sets of 2 and turning them into sets of 4. All right, so now we're gonna press all of these seams open. I just kind of pull them toward me as I go, and it's just a little bit smaller seam. You do wanna make sure, because in all these instances, it's a very narrow background strip there, that you are not accidentally pressing the other seam going in the opposite direction. We don't want that. So just keep that in mind as you're working. All right, so to kind of give you like a timeline, I was able to get all of my strip piece units together and trimmed while my kids were at school one day, so about 6 hours. And then it took me a day to get all of my rows sewn together for a twin size quilt and laid out. And it's taken me about a day and a half to add my sashing in between and then also sew the rest of the quilt together. So in all, you're looking at maybe 3-4 days if you're an efficient sewer to get this quilt top together, if you're working 8-hour days. Obviously, if you're not working 8-hour days, you don't have a full Saturday to devote to it, and you're just working here and there, it's going to take longer. But this is a fast quilt. It really works really very well. So what I did for all of these is I laid everything out. I got all my rows together first. I numbered them with address labels, so that way I knew what was supposed to be in what order. And then I started working to put them in together of sets of 4. So that way they're easier to transport, easier to put away if I have to, which I did. And I had to get them all taken from this big area at the shop I was working on over the weekend, and I've got to finish it at home in my bedroom. And so it was very good that I numbered all of that, because now I know where everything is supposed to be. But it makes it really easy to transport if you have them in sets of 4. It's a lot easier to move it from place to place rather than, you know, all of the individual rows, which I've had to move some of those too. All right, so what I did next is I lined everything up with these sashing strips that are just going in between. And I made sure to sew all of them to the top side, because if you sew some to the top and some to the bottom, then that is not going to work. You're going to end up with double sashing in some places, and you will have none where you need it. So sew everything to the top or sew everything to the bottom. It really does not matter which you choose, just pick one. And in my case, since I'm sewing everything to the top, once I get my final row done, which this is my final row, I also will need to sew one to the bottom just to even it out, make everything look nice. But this is really simple from this point. I just have to pin it, sew it through, press it, and then you can start assembling those rows. I'm just going to do that real quick so you can kind of see the process, and then you have absolutely everything you know in order to make this quilt at home. Now at this step, just to make sure everything lies super flat, I do take my spray mister. There's just water in here, but it turns into a fine aerosol mist that I can just put on a continuous spray over my fabric. No water droplets are left or anything. It just allows me to get a really flat press on this without putting steam in my iron, because every iron I've ever put water into eventually spits and gets my fabric gross. And my last Aliso I had for 6 or 7 years before it finally died, and I never ever had that problem with it. So I want to make sure that this new one stays good for a long time. All right, so you can see how this goes together with subway tile, where we have the nice big ones, but they're offset so that they're coming together on center. It's a great way to show off every one of these fabrics without worrying about how they intermingle with each other, because they each are their own separate thing and they're separated by that white background fabric. It's really very fun. I think this pattern could be used with many, many different things. I think batiks with a black background would be absolutely fantastic in this one. Cave would be absolutely fantastic with this one, with a nice solid or maybe aboriginal dot for your background that contrasts with whatever fabrics you have on there. This is just, the possibilities are, I think, endless with this pattern. I think we could have a lot of fun with it in years to come, but everybody always loves a good black and white quilt, and so this one definitely suffices for that. So again, the pattern is called Subway, and you can get it over on our website, shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. You're going to get all your instructions and fabric requirements for crib, lap, twin, and king. And it is a very versatile pattern, really fun, and it goes pretty quick. I mean, a twin size quilt you can get done in under 4 days for the top. That's fast. That's really fast and super fun. I love the way that this is turning out, and I'm just going to do some straight line quilting on it, but stay tuned because we'll do a video on how to do that as well, using your long arm to get straight lines. And we're not using channel locks because I don't like them. So you'll see what I do instead, so you can know how to do it at home too. But also, if you are just working on your home sewing machine, feel free to just stitch down the center of this with your walking foot and call it a day. You will have quilted it sufficiently. It will look great and modern and also look fantastic. So really cool, really fun, and I hope you have enjoyed this. Check out Stashin' with Stephanie, especially on a month like this. I don't think we're going to have too much fabric left by the time we release this to everybody who is not on our subscription club, because there are 800 people who are going to get access to this a full 24, sometimes 36 hours before we release it to everybody else. And there has been a lot of chatter about this collection, and I think there's going to be a lot of folks who want to get extra fabric. So make sure that you're signed up. Again, if you are signing up because you saw this video, this collection is not coming in the mail to you unless you order the kit for Subway. You're going to get a new collection from Wyndham, which we will reveal in the email that we're sending out with this video in it to all of our non-members. But it's really fun, very springy. It's going to look fabulous, but very different from this month. And that's the fun part. We try to bring you the best modern fabric offering that is coming out that month. It is a brand new collection, not some bargain basement stuff. It is brand new. You get all the goodies. You get exclusive access a full 24 hours before everybody else to get fabric. You get the discount on the fabric for the bundle. You get the discount on any additional fabric that you want to order. You get the pattern for free, plus all of our previous Stashin' with Stephanie patterns, all of my Fat Quarter books, Fat Quarter Patchwork Quilts, and Fat Quarter Workshop. Those are also an exclusive discount for you. So it's really fun. It's an awesome club to be a part of. We've got 800 members and it's always growing. So have some fun and get you some fabric, because this is good. This is a fun one. So I'll leave you with that. And until next time, happy quilting.